Gita study group. This is our second meeting, and this evening we're going to look at chapter 1 of the Bhagavad Gita. But before we begin, we should start with a vandanam, prayers to our spiritual masters and so on. But can ask everybody, please keep your camera on and your sound muted. Thank you. So we should begin with a small vandanam. Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Jutapada Kamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakam Vitamscha Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakoram Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Namo Abhadanaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Tise Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Atanata Manta Gurun Bhagavata Tadan Vyasan Jagat Gurun Natta Tato Jayam Adirayat Mukam Karoti Vatshalam Bhangam Langayate Girim Jat Kripa Tamaham Mande Sri Gurun Dinataranam. So thanks everyone for joining us and being on time. I hope you all have your Bhagavad Gitas with you. We're going to begin by hearing the Sanskrit of the first chapter 1, which is called Sainya Darshan, or Observing the Armies, also known as Arjuna Vishada Yoga, or the Dejection of Arjuna. So we'll start. So you can follow the Sanskrit in your Gitas, and we're going to hear that from our Gurudev, Srila Bhakti Sundar Govindadev Goswami Maharaj.
Sri Guru Gauranga Srimad Bhagavad Gita Padamotthaya Sanya Darshan Dhritarashtra Uvacha Dharma Kshetri Kurukshetri Samaveta Jujutsava Mamaka Pandava Chaiva Kima Kudbata Sanjaya Uvacha Drishtatu Pandavanikam Burhang Durjadhanastada Acharyamupasangamya Rajavachanamapravit Pasvaitang Panduputranam Acharyamahatim Chamu Burhang Drupadaputrena Devashis Dhimata Atra Shuda Maheswasa Bhimarjuna Samajudhi Yuyudhana Viratascha Drupadascha Maharasa Drishtaketuscha Gitana Kashirajascha Virjaman Urujit Kunti Bhojascha Shaibhascha Narapungava Judhamanuscha Vikranta Uttamaujascha Virjaman Saubhatru Draupadeyascha Sarva Eva Maharatha Asmakantu Vishishtaje Tan Nivodha Dijottama Nayaka Mama Sainyascha Sangartham Tan Bravimite Bhavan Bhishyascha Karnascha Kripascha Samitinjaya Ashwathama Vikarnascha Saumadaktir Jayadratha Annecha Bhava Shura Madarthi Takta Jivita Nana Shastra Praharana Sarve Yuddha Vicharada Aparjattam Tadasmakam बलं भीष्माभिरक्षितं परित्यक्तं चिदमे तेषां बलं भीमाभिरक्षितम् अयनेषु च सर्वेषु यथा भागमवस्थिताः भीष्ममेवाभिरक्षन्तु भवन्तः सर्व एव हि तस्य संजानयन् हर्षं कुरुविद्ध पितामहः सिंहनादं वीरिणादोच्चैर्शङ्खं दध्नौ प्रतापवान् ततः शङ्खाश्च भीर्यश्च प्रणवानकगोमुखाः सहसैवाभ्यहनन्त सशब्दस्तुमुलोऽभवत् ततः शीतैर्हैर्युक्ते महति सन्दने स्थितौ माधवः पाण्डवाश्चैव दिव्यौ शङ्खौ प्रदद्रतु पाञ्चजन्यं ऋषिकेषु देवदत्तं धनञ्जय पौण्ड्रं दध्नौ महाशङ्खं भीमकर्मा वृकोदर अनंत विजय राजा कुंतीपुत्रो युधिष्ठिरः नकुलः सहदेवश्च सुघोष मणिपुष्पको कश्यश्च परमेश्वासः शिखण्डी च महारथः धृष्टद्युम्नो विराटश्च सात्यकीश्चापराजितः द्रुपदो द्रौपदेयाश्च सर्वशः पृथिवीपते सौभद्रश्च महाबाहु शङ्खान् दध्नु पृथक् पृथक् स्वघोषधातराष्ट्राणां हृदयानि पदारयत् नभश्च पृथिवीं चैव तुमुलभूनुनादयन् अथ व्यवस्थितान् दृष्ट्वा धार्तराष्ट्रान् कपिध्वजः प्रवृत्ते शस्त्रसम्पाते धनुरुद्यम्य पाण्डवः ऋषिकेशं तदा वाक्यम् इदम् आह महीपते अर्जुन उवाच सेनयोरुभयोर्मध्ये रथं स्थापयाम्यच्युत यावदेतान् निरीक्षेऽहं जद्धूकामान् अवस्थितान् क्वैर्मया सह योद्धव्यम् अस्मिन् रणसमुद्यमे यत्समानान् अवेक्षेऽहं जयतेऽत्र समागतः धार्तराष्ट्रस्य दुर्बुद्धेर्युद्धे प्रियचिकित्सवः संजय उवाच एवमुक्तो ऋषिकेशो गुडाकेशेन भारत सेनयोरुभयोर्मध्ये स्थापयित्वा रथोत्तमम् भीष्मद्रोणः प्रमुखतः सर्वेषां च महेक्षिताम् उवाच पार्थ पश्यैतान् समवेतान् कुरुनिति तत्रापश्यत् स्थितान् पार्थ पितॄन् पितामहान् आचार्यान् मातुलान् भ्रातॄन् पुत्रान् पौत्रान् सखींस्तथा श्वशुरान् सुहृदश्चैव सेनयोरुभयोरपि तान् समीक्ष्य सकौन्तेय सर्वान् बन्धुरवस्थितान् कृपया परयाविष्टो विषिदन्निदमब्रवीत् अर्जुन उवाच दृष्टे मान् सजनान् कृष्ण जुजुत्सुन् समवस्थितान् सीदन्ति मम गात्राणि मुखं च परिशुष्यति बेपथुश्च शरीरे मे रोमहर्षश्च जायते गाण्डिवं स्रंसते हस्ता तच्चैव परिगच्छति न च शक्नोम्यवस्थातुं भ्रमतीव च मे मनः निमित्तानि च पश्यामि विपरीतानि केशव न च श्रेयोनुपश्यामि हत्वा स्वजनमाहवे न काङ्क्षे विजयं कृष्ण न च राज्यं सुखानि च किं नो राज्येन गोविन्द किं भोगैर्जीवितेन वा येषामर्थे काङ्क्षितं नो राज्यं भोगा सुखानि च तैमेव स्थिता युद्धे प्राणां त्यक्त्वा धनानि च आचार्याः पितरः पुत्रास्तथैव च पितामहः मातुला श्वशुरा पौत्रा शल्या सम्बन्धिनस्तथा etāna no hantu ichchāmi gnatopi madhusūdana opi trailakya rajyasya hetu kinna mahi krite niyatta dhātarashtanna kāpriti satchanādana pāpameva sraidasaman hattaitānātutaina tasmannaraha vayamapantum dhātarashtan sabandhava sajanam hi katham hatva sukhina syama matam jatta te na pashyanti lobhavahata chetasah kulakkhaya kritang dosham mitra drohi chapatakam katham na gyayam asmabhi papadasman nivartitum kulakkhaya kritang dosham prapashyati bhir chanatana kulakkhaya pranashyanti kuladharma sanatana dharme nasti kulam krishnam adharmo vibhavattuta adharma vibhavat krishna pradushyanti kulastriya trishu dushtashu varsneya jayate varna shankara shankaro narakaiva kulagraran kulasya patanti pitaro chesang lupta pindodaka kriya doshairetaiः kulagnānāṁ varna shankara kārakaiः sattante jati dharmah kuladharmascha sāsatah utsanna kuladharmānāṁ manushyanāṁ janārdana narake niyatam vāso bhavati tanu sushrama aho vata mahat papam kartum davashitāvayam jadrajya sukhalobhena pantum sajana muddata jadi mam apratikara asastam shastrapanaya dhatrashta rane hantu stanme khema tarang bhali sanjaya vacha eva muktarjuna sankhe rathopastha upavishat visrijya sasarang chabam shokasang vigna manasa iti Sri Mahabharati Satasahasrang Samhitayam Vayasikang Bhishma Parmani Srimad Bhagavad Gita Upanishadsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastri Sri Krishna Arjuna Sangavadi Chaitanya Darshanam Nama Pramodhaya.
All right. Okay, so the first chapter is fairly short. Most of the chapters actually are about the same length. The second chapter is one of the longest. That will be our next. And this first chapter. We'll go through the English in a minute. Why I want everybody to hear the Sanskrit is because, one, that's the original form in which the Gita was spoken. Two, the vibration is very purifying just to hear the verses being chanted. And three, especially that we're hearing those verses chanted by our Gurudev, Om Vishnupad Srila Bhakti Sundar Govinda Maharaj. That's also very beneficial for us all. And four, that his pronunciation is much better than mine is, so we've had him to do it for us. So that now we'll go through the English of the chapter, and then a little summary and question. So there are many Sanskrit names of different people, the warriors that have assembled there. So don't get too hung up on that. Also, sometimes when Krishna and Arjuna are speaking, they address each other by different names. So sometimes Krishna will say Dhananjaya, that's another name of Arjuna, or Arjuna may address Krishna as Madhusudan or Keshava, or like this. So when that happens, I'll try and interject and say, this is Arjuna, This means Arjuna's name, another name for Arjuna. So not to get too, try not to get lost with the names. The first chapter is filled with that. And it's setting the scene for the whole, the Gita, in the scene in which the Gita is couched. And secondly, I think, is my own observation, that the first chapter is like a gateway, that if many people give up because of the first chapter, because there's so many. I remember I was like 14 years old when I first read this chapter, and I remember thinking, I'll never remember all these. I can't even pronounce these names. I've no idea who they are, what it means, but I'll persevere. So it's a kind of a hurdle for us to try and persevere past that, so we can get to the actual subject matter of the Gita. So it begins. So Dhritarashtra, he's the king, the blind king, and his sons are known as the Kauravas, and he is the brother of Pandu, who was the king before, but he died, and his sons are the Pandavas: Arjuna, Yudhisthira, Bhimsen, Nakula, and Sahadev. But actually, they're the same family; they're cousins, and Dhritarashtra is their uncle. But because of this war has come between them, he decides to stress by saying in this first verse, "My sons and the sons of Pandu." So the book begins. Dhritarashtra said, "O Sanjay, what happened when my sons and the sons of Pandu assembled for battle at the holy place of Kurukshetra?" Sanjaya said, "Seeing the Pandavas' soldiers and armies arrayed for battle, King Duryodhan is the eldest son of Dhritarashtra, King Duryodhan approached Dronacharya and said," so Dronacharya is there, both the Pandavas and the Kauravas' guru, Astra Guru, that means martial arts guru. He taught them how all the arts of warfare. So but he's fighting on the side of Duryodhan. Duryodhan has approached Dronacharya and he says, "Oh, my teacher, please observe the great armies of the Pandavas arranged in military formation by your brilliant disciple, Drishtadyumna." Drishtadyumna is one warrior who fought on the sides of the Pandavas. And I love this name, actually, Drishtadyumna. It means the fireborn. Maybe we'll talk about that again later, but the fireborn. Among these soldiers are the expert archers Bhima, Arjuna, and others equally skilled in battle, like Satyaki, King Birata, the great fighter Drupada, Drishtaketu, Chekitana, the mighty hero Kasiraj, Purujit, Kuntiboja, the noble king Shaibya, the valiant Judamanyu, the heroic Uttamoja, Abhimanyu, and the sons of Draupadi. They are all great warriors indeed. O best of the twice born, please consider too the foremost among us, the commanders of my armies. I submit their names before you. Firstly, there is your respected self, then Bhishma, Karna, the ever-victorious Kripacharya, Ashwatthama, Vikarna, Bhurishrava, Jayadratha, and many other heroes skilled in the art of warfare, all armed with various weapons and prepared to lay down their very lives for me. The strength of our army, headed by Bhishma, seems inestimable. Yet the strength of the Pandavas' army, protected by Bhima, is estimable. Excuse me. Now take up your posts at the strategic points of the formation in support of Bhishma. Then with a war cry like the roar of a lion, the venerable elder Bhishma loudly blew his conch shell to encourage Duryodhana. At once there arose a tumultuous vibration of conch shells, kettle drums, hand drums, bugles, and the resounding of many instruments. Then Lord Sri Krishna and Arjuna, in a magnificent chariot drawn by white horses, blew their divine conch shells. Rishikesh, this is another name of Krishna, Rishikesh blew his conch shell, the Panchajanya. Dhananjaya, Arjuna, sounded his, the Devadatta, and Bhimsen, the performer of mighty tasks, blew the conch shell Pondra. King Yudhisthira, the son of Kunti, blew the Ananta Vijay, while Nakul and Sahadev blew the conch shells Sughosh and Manipushpaka. O Lord of the earth, the skilled archer Kashiraj, the great warrior Shikandi, Dristajumna, King Birata, the unconquerable Satyaki, King Drupada, the sons of Draupadi, and the mighty son of Subhadra, Abhimanyu, all blew their conch shells. Resounding throughout the land and heavens, the tremendous vibration of these conch shells pierced the heart of the sons of Dhritarashtra. O king, as the battle was about to commence, Arjuna, whose chariot was adorned with the flag of Hanuman, seeing Duryodhana and his army poised for battle, took up his bow and said to Sri Krishna, O Krishna, please place my chariot between the two armies, so I may observe the warriors with whom I must contend on this battlefield, and who have come to fight for the satisfaction of the wicked Duryodhana. Sanjaya said, O descendant of Bharat, after the vigilant Arjuna spoke these words, Sri Krishna, the Lord of the perceptions of all living beings, drew the grand chariot between both armies, before Bhishma, Drona, and all the chieftains of the earth. The Lord then said, O Partha, behold the Kauravas assembled here for battle. There within both armies, Arjuna saw paternal and maternal elders, grandfathers, teachers, brothers, sons, grandsons, fathers-in-law, friends, and other well-wishers. Seeing his kinsman present on the battlefield, Arjuna, the son of Kunti, was grief-stricken and overcome with pity. He said, O Krishna, seeing all these relatives and friends assembled and eager for battle, the strength is draining from my limbs and my mouth feels parched. I am trembling and the hairs on my body are standing on end. My skin is burning and I am losing grip of my Gandiva bow. O Keshava, I cannot maintain my composure. Keshava is Krishna's name. I cannot maintain my composure any longer. My mind is disturbed, and I see bad omens. I do not see any good in killing my kinsman in this battle. O Krishna, I have no wish for victory or to enjoy a kingdom. O Govinda, that's another name of Krishna, if those for whom we desire all this, teachers, paternal and maternal elders, sons, grandfathers, fathers-in-law, grandsons, brothers-in-law, and other relatives are about to risk their wealth and lives in battle, of what value is our kingdom and its royal pleasures, or even life itself? O Madhusudan, Krishna's name, I do not wish to kill them, even though I myself may be killed. O Janardhan, another name of Krishna, even if we gain sovereignty over the three worlds, not to speak of ruling the earth, how can we be happy if we kill the sons of Dhritarashtra? Only sin will befall us if we slay our teachers and guardians, though they be our adversaries. We cannot take the lives of our own relatives. The sons of Dhritarashtra, O Madhava, Krishna's name, how can we be happy by killing our kinsmen? Although they, overwhelmed with greed, cannot see the sin of betraying one's friends and destroying the dynasty, O Janardhan, how can we not refrain from this heinous act, being in full knowledge of the consequences? With the decline of the dynasty, its religious traditions are lost. When religious practices are lost, irreligion overcomes the entire dynasty. O Krishna, descendant of the Vrishni dynasty, when the dynasty is thus overcome by irreligion, the women of the family become corrupt, and adulterated progeny is the result. Adulterated progeny forces both the family and its aggressors into a hellish existence. The same fate befalls their ancestors, because regular offerings of food and water to them cease. Such heinous acts by the destroyers of the dynasty are the cause of adulterated progeny, ruining the culture of a civilized society and noble lineage. O Janardhan, we have heard that persons whose familial, social, and religious traditions are disrupted dwell always in hell. Alas, what a grave sin we have resolved to commit. Driven by greed for trifling royal happiness, we are about to slay our own kinsmen. If unarmed and unresisting, I am killed on this battlefield by the armed sons of Dhritarashtra, that will be more auspicious for me. Sanjaya said, there on the battlefield, speaking these words, Arjuna cast aside his bow and arrows and sat down on the chariot, his heart filled with sadness. End of chapter 1, observing the armies, from the conversation of Sri Krishna and Arjuna in Srimad Bhagavad Gita Upanishad, the yoga scripture of transcendental knowledge, in the Bhishma Parva of Sri Mahabharata, the holy scripture revealed by Srila Vyasadeva in 100,000 verses. So there we are. This is the setting the scene. So this week's worksheet, you'll all get a copy of that after the after this evening finishes. So first is the chapter summary. So when the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna placed the chariot between the opposing armies, Arjuna, seeing his family members, friends, relatives, and revered teachers all ready to do battle and sacrifice their lives, was exceedingly moved to pity. Failing in strength, his mind bewildered, his body trembling, and losing hold of his famed bow, Gandiva, he fell victim to a great despondency of spirit and sat down on his chariot in deep melancholy, having lost the will to fight. So prepared acronyms on each chapter to help us remember the contents of the chapter. Now, they're words, but they're English words. So I do apologize to our other listeners who joined us from different countries who speak different languages. I'm not sure how the acronym will work in your language, but the acronym for the first chapter is doubt. So the spiritual journey usually starts with a doubt. Over the years, our friends, family, society, and the media paint the perfect picture of success, and we subsequently shape our lives in determined pursuance of it. At a certain point, however, we begin to doubt whether that perfect life is achievable or will actually make us happy. We begin to question the materialistic goals, aspirations, and milestones of success that have become deeply ingrained within us. Could there be some deeper purpose to life, While this initial doubt can often bring great uncertainty and confusion, it can also bring us to the start of our spiritual journey. It is this very doubt that Arjuna expresses at the onset of this sacred conversation. So the acronym doubt. So D for Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana, the first verses 1 to 12. Innumerable soldiers have assembled on the battlefield of Kurukshetra due to the obstinacy and deep-rooted material aspirations of these two characters, bent on usurping their cousin's kingdom. Sitting in his palace, King Dhritarashtra inquires about the latest events on the battlefield, while his son Duryodhana is busy firing up his army as it prepares for a fratricidal war. Dhritarashtra is physically blind, but he and his son are also blinded by greed, envy, and material desire. When the individual starts to think in terms of I, me, and mine, primarily interested in selfish gain and personal aggrandizement, then anxiety, frustration, and disappointment are inevitable. Unfortunately, one who is materially entangled becomes oblivious to the ill effects of his actions. So the second letter, O. O for ominous result, verses 13 to 20. Despite Duryodhana's boastful words, the ominous result of this confrontation is made clear from the onset. Too many signs indicate his inevitable defeat. Those who stand on the side of purity and righteousness are always victorious, regardless of whether the worldly odds seem stacked against them. One who is a carrier of goodness is never overcome by evil. The next letter, U, for uncertainty, verses 21 to 27. Despite knowing that he defends virtue, Arjuna is still uncertain about fighting his opponents, who are also his relatives. The chariots are readied, arrows are drawn, battle cries are sounded. But Arjuna wants to take a final look at the armies. He requests Krishna, who assumes the role of his charioteer, to drive to the middle of the battlefield so he can satisfy his curiosity. To his credit, despite the intensity of the situation, Arjuna takes time to reflect. Life may be crammed with responsibilities and pressing issues, but attendance to such demands should not be at the expense of quality spiritual introspection. Unfortunately, the chronic disease of modern man is the excuse of no time when it comes to such soul searching. The next letter, B, for bewilderment, which is verses 28 to 30. Foreseeing the imminent suffering and death that is the inevitable consequence of war, Arjuna begins to analyze his predicament. At this stage, bereft of a broader spiritual vision, his uncertainty intensifies and he becomes bewildered. When one lacks an understanding of his spiritual identity, his relationship with God, and the critical purpose behind this world, one inevitably becomes disturbed and frustrated by life's challenges. And finally, T, turning point, verses 31 to 42. Arjuna justifies his decision to retreat from fighting. One, it would be cruel and heartless to prematurely terminate the lives of so many soldiers. Two, even an unrivaled kingdom would bring no happiness, since he'd be bereft of the company of his near and dear ones. And three, one would surely accrue sinful reaction as a result of such violence. Four, the wholesale killing involved would destroy the family unit and social structure, causing havoc for further generations. Thus, his mind overwhelmed by grief, Arjuna sets aside his weapons and resolves not to fight. So here we are. This is setting the scene for the Bhagavad Gita. So Arjuna, in his he's a devotee of Krishna. So although he's a warrior, devotees are generally very soft-hearted, and so he feels so much pity and compassion for his kinsmen, although they are arrayed in the opposing army, ready to kill him and his brothers. He doesn't want to do that. And he gives so many reasons there why he shouldn't do that, why he thinks he shouldn't do that. But finally he says, I can't fight. And he drops his bow and his arrows, and he turns to Krishna and says, I don't know what I'm meant to do. I don't know what's right. I don't know what's wrong. I can't understand what I'm supposed to do in this situation. Krishna, please give your instruction to me. So this is the archetypal guru and disciple relationship. That when we come to that point in our lives that we don't know what we should do, what's right, what's wrong, what we should pursue in life, what should we make the goal of our life, then we need the advice of a guru. In broad terms, guru means teacher, but also the word guru means heavy. Heavy is, you can say, a literal translation of the word guru is heavy. So our Guru Maharaj would say, heavy like the Himalayas. It means he cannot be moved from his spiritual conception. And we, on the other hand, we are called lagu. And lagu means light. That means we're always being buffered here and there. And, one day we're thinking this, the next day we're thinking the opposite. And, we're being battered from pillar to post by the demands of our mind. So in this case, we need to approach the guru. And in the scripture it says that how you should approach the guru, as if your head is on fire and you need to get to water. If your head is on fire, water's the only thing. You need to run to that like your head is on fire. And this is, in this context, Arjuna is our proxy, and Krishna is the universal guru, directly Arjuna's guru. And we will discuss more the position of guru and the necessity of guru in the further chapters. But here now he's set up the scene in which Arjuna surrenders to Krishna, and in the next chapter, Krishna begins to instruct him on the nature of the soul, reality, our dharma, our duty, and that progresses through various different types of yoga, and they're coming finally to the path of bhakti as the highest expression of yoga. All paths of yoga lead ultimately to bhakti yoga, and this is the, as our Guru Maharaj used this term for his Bhagavad Gita, the hidden treasure of the sweet absolute. Bhakti is the hidden treasure of the sweet absolute. So this chapter, and when you get your worksheets, you'll see that I've put some questions there. They're for your own meditation, and if you look through the chapter, you should find the answers to those questions. So 5 questions, there, and also one verse to learn from there, which is the first verse of the chapter. Dhritarashtra Uvacha Dharmaketri Kuruketre Samaveta Yuyutsava Mamaka Pandavaschaivam Kim Makurubhakta Sanjaya. Dhritarashtra said, O Sanjay, what happened when my sons and the sons of Pandu assembled for battle at the holy place of Kurukshetra? So, how are we doing for time? All right. So, I want to open up if anyone has any questions about this and what we've read this evening and what you've heard this evening. Try to answer those questions.
There's a question here.
Yes.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. My question is about the actual reason of the fight.
Yeah.
Well, Dhritarashtra wanted to be the king instead of Pandu.
Yeah.
But I understand from Mahabharata that Dhritarashtra was the eldest son.
He was.
So why shouldn't he be the king?
He was the eldest brother, but because he was blind, it was considered that Pandu should be the king because he could see. So it was, and that was accepted at the time. But then, due to a curse, Pandu died, and then Dhritarashtra had to assume the throne. But it's actually not so much about Dhritarashtra as to who would be the heir to the throne. So because Pandu was the original king, then the sons of Pandu, the first son of Pandu, eldest son of Pandu, Yudhisthira, he was the rightful heir to the throne. But because Dhritarashtra was now on the throne, Duryodhana was considered to be, he considered that was his, he should be the successor, should be the rightful heir to the throne. So it was a little ambiguous as to who was the rightful heir to the throne. But the elders, they decided that that Yudhisthira was the rightful heir, but Dhritarashtra would not accept that, and so you'll find in Mahabharata that he made many different arrangements to try to kill the Pandavas, and in many different ways they tried, but because the Pandavas were always allied with Krishna, then all of their attempts failed to kill them. But finally, because Yudhisthira's one weakness was that he could never refuse a challenge to gambling, and he was challenged by Shikandi, who was his uncle, but on the side of the Kauravas, and he was a notorious cheat. So when he played games of dice, he would always win, but he always won by cheating. Anyhow, Yudhisthira couldn't refuse his challenge, lost the game, if you call it that, the betting, and as a result of that, he lost everything. And finally, he was they were made to go into exile. The Pandavas went into exile for 13 years. They had to hide, and during those 13 years, they lived in various places. But the last year, on the 14th year, they had to the they had to hide and not be discovered by anybody. They went to live in a different kingdom, and there's a whole history of that. But then at the end of the 14th year, they came back, and Yudhisthira approached Duryodhan. Duryodhan was the eldest of 100 sons of Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra had 100 sons, and Duryodhan was the first. And when he was born, there were so many inauspicious omens at the time of his birth, like blood raining from the sky was one, and many different like portents. And the Brahmins, the king's priests, the advisors to the king, they said, this child will be the destruction of the dynasty. And the Brahmins advised him, he's so wicked that you should kill him now while he's a child, while he's a baby. Don't allow him to grow up. You know, we hear about that sometimes. People say, if someone could go back in time, maybe they could kill Adolf Hitler before he rose to power when he was just a child, you know, like something like that. So, but Dhritarashtra, although he understood all of those signs and portents and everything, and he knew what the Brahmins were advising him was right, he, as any father, he just became immediately attached to his son, even a few minutes after he was born. We know that happens with everybody, right? The mother and father, they just fall in love with their son. So although he knew it was perhaps the right thing to do for the kingdom, he couldn't do it. So anyhow, when after their final year of exile, when the Pandavas returned, they petitioned Duryodhan and King Dhritarashtra. We don't want the king. We don't want the kingdom. All we want is you give us 5 villages, one for each of us. We'll be satisfied with that. And Duryodhan, he said, I won't give you enough land to put on the head of a pin. And so, although even Lord Krishna tried to prevent by diplomacy the war, it was inevitable. So actually, it was Duryodhan wanted that war because he wanted to eliminate the Pandavas. He was so envious of them. Although they, as children, they all grew up like brothers, living together. This was the case. So, and it was, you can say, the will of providence. So actually, all of that took place just so that Lord Krishna could speak the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. So it was inevitable that the war would take place, and in fact, it was after the war, and the descriptions of that war is like killed in that war than in World War I and World War II put together. There were armies from all over the world came to fight on either side. It's mentioned in the Mahabharata the different races that came. The Deutsches means the Germans, they were there. The Turks, they're called the Javanas, they were there. And like many races from all over the world came with their armies to support one or the other side. And so many were died on the battlefield there. And after the war, there was one Brahmin. His name was Uttanka, and he came and saw. You know, after the war, you can understand, right? All the wives and mothers, they're all coming, trying to see my son here, or my husband is here, and you know, and like so much crying and suffering and so many things. And that when Uttanka saw that, and then suddenly he saw, oh, there's Krishna. And he said, I know who you are, Krishna. You could have made this happen in another way. So you're the cause of all this happening, all this suffering, all of this war, everything. You're the cause of that. So now I'm going to throw a curse on you. And it's told that Brahmins, they amass is called tejas. It's like a spiritual power, and sometimes if they become angry, they can all of that power is contained. They keep it in their sacred thread. Brahmins wear a sacred thread, and sometimes they can break that thread and throw all of that power against somebody, and it's devastating. So he was planning to do that to Krishna. Yes, because you're to blame for that. But Krishna said to him, Autanka, you've gained so much power through your penances and austerity and sacrifices and everything. But if you throw it at me, it'll be wasted because you can't. It won't touch me because I'm not from this world. I am always living in the plane of adhoksaja plane. That means the spiritual plane. So all of your power that you've got, you may be very powerful, but it's all material. It won't touch me. You'll just lose everything and it won't be able to touch me. So then he thought better of that. But anyway, it's a very you can say complex story or history as to why the war took place, and it's very nuanced. So we need to study the Mahabharata to understand the historical reasons for the war, and can say briefly, in a nutshell, that the war had to take place so that Krishna could speak the Bhagavad Gita. And Krishna himself, in the Gita, later on, he says, Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata. That means, he says, age after age I come to the world to annihilate the demonic elements and to rescue my devotees and to re-establish real religion or dharma in the world. So Bhagavad Gita is one of the ways in which he did that. And also it was it'll be explained later when Krishna explains to Arjuna that actually, he says later on, he says, actually all of these warriors on both sides, they're already dead. I've decided that they should be removed from the earth, the burden of the earth from such wicked people. Then they're already dead. Only I want that you will act as my instrument for doing that. So this is one of the things that he needs to explain to Arjuna. Now, this is say the actual answer to your question is you'll find if you study the Mahabharata. Okay. There is somebody else. Purushottam Prabhu has a question. So if you can unmute yourself.
Hi, Dandavas, Devashis Prabhu.
Dhanyavad Prabhu.
I guess it's kind of a two-part question. From last week, from that class, I was reading Golden Reflections, and Govinda Maharaj mentions that Guru Maharaj, in the course of his life, he gave a progression of instructions, and that the Westerners came at the last stage, like the fourth lesson, which he relayed was Guru Maharaj's commentary on the Brahma Gayatri, and he said that Prapana Jivanamrita is the first lesson, and that the Bhagavad Gita constitutes kind of the middle position or the second. So with that in mind, I was also wondering in the first this first chapter, all the names, and how the names seem to parallel the roles that each person plays in this Bhagavad Gita. So maybe like there's kind of at least a couple layers here. There's the historical aspect of the battle, and there's also this inner, deeper meaning of the Bhagavad Gita. Could you maybe say something on that? I hope that is a little not too vague. Maybe that it's clear enough.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are those who contend that all of the different personalities involved from the Mahabharata involved in the war, that they represent particular, you can say, vices or particular aspects of the spiritual personalities and our own spiritual development. That is true to some degree, but it is not everything. So some people try to make out that the Gita is not like it's actually about a battle within ourselves, but it is in that regard that it's like an allegorical story, but it is also actually fact. It is actually a factual history that did take place 5,000 years ago. So we shouldn't get too sort of caught up with the allegorical side of it and trying to ascertain, like, oh, who does Yudhisthira represent? Who does these things are there, but really we should try to see what is the overarching lesson that we find in the Bhagavad Gita. So there are many, and in Mahabharata itself, there are many different stories with all different kinds of lessons for us. In fact, Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he said that higher than the Gita is the Vastraharanam of Draupadi. That means when the warriors, the Kauravas, they try to strip Draupadi naked, removing her cloth, and finally she calls out to Lord Krishna to protect her, and raising her arms in the air, she calls the names of Krishna. And when Krishna hears, "Hey, Gopi Jana Balaba," then he has to come to her aid, although he wasn't physically present there in that assembly. He heard her call and provided unlimited amount of cloth to her, so that however hard Dushashan, the brother of Duryodhan, tried to disrobe her, he couldn't do that. So that's known as the Vastraharana of Draupadi, but it symbolizes real full surrender to the lotus feet of the Lord, accepting the Lord as our guardian, as our protector, our savior. And that's the highest lesson of the whole Mahabharata, even greater, Guru Maharaj says, than the lessons of Bhagavad Gita. That Sharanagati is shown by her there. And many lessons in the Mahabharata also. So, and it is, you can say it's actually, say rudimentary, but it is primary teaching of Krishna consciousness that we find in the Bhagavad Gita. Although for most of us, the lessons that are taught there are very hard for us to understand. So, but the final part of Srimad Bhagavad Gita, in the 18th chapter, we know Krishna's clarion call to everybody: Sarva Dharmam Parityaja Mamekam Sharanam Braja Aham Tam Sarva Papebhyo Moksha Ishami Ma Shruta. that Krishna says, everything I've taught you up until now, now you can just forget all that and just surrender to me. That's sarva dharma, and all the different things that you conceive of as being your dharma, meaning your religion or your duty or your identity in this world. You can forget all of that and just surrender to me. And if you surrender to me, you will come to me. You won't be overcome by sin for abandoning the things that the responsibilities that you have in this world. I'll protect you from that. Have no fear. This is the ultimate, you can say, ultimate teaching of Bhagavad Gita is this, and this is the first stage of Sharanagati. Sharanagati means surrender. So Krishna is saying to Arjuna, surrender to me, everything, surrender everything to me, and you will come to me. But how and in which way we are to surrender to Krishna, that is not really being given there. So the ideal is there, but the actual process of that, we find that later on, and we find that particularly in Srimad Bhagavatam, but also, in a condensed way in our Guru Maharaj's Prapana Jivanamritam that he composed. Srila Govinda Maharaj said it wasn't just something that Srila Sridhar Maharaj composed, but actually the manifestation of a holy scripture, a goddess. He's called Prapana Jivanamritam a goddess in book form, manifested from the holy pen of Srila Sridhar Maharaj. So there you will find what is actually necessary for us to surrender, Sharanagati, what that actually means. And Guru Maharaj says, because that doesn't come naturally to us, because of our conditioning, that is something that we should discuss every day. So Srila Govinda Maharaj says, as we should read Bhagavad Gita every day, and I always try to read at least one verse of Bhagavad Gita every day, we should also read Prapana Jivanamritam every day if we want to really understand what is surrender. Not just the theory, but the practice of surrender. The practical application of that in our lives. So I don't know if that answers your question, Prabhu, but it's what's coming to me right now. Is that okay?
Needs to unmute.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Prabhu. I think that is the thrust of the question, the positive or the practical aspect of Sharanagati beyond a theoretical aspect. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So our time is coming to a close. Does anyone else have a question?
I think there was one more here.
Okay.
Sunit to do. Did you have another question?
Oh, sorry. I didn't- well, I just wanted to, well, thanks very much for very elaborate answer to my question, but you're basically saying that Dhritarashtra, he was temporarily in place of Pandu because he died. So then Duryodhana took advantage of the situation. So he wanted to claim the throne.
Yeah.
But and I accept that you said, well, it's all explained thoroughly in Mahabharata, and ultimately Krishna wanted this thing to happen. But just from the, I don't know, technical or cultural point of view, why Dhritarashtra couldn't be the king in the first place? You said he was blind.
Yeah.
But, well, at least in today's political correctness, if you say,
Yeah.
well, you cannot be the king because you're blind, I don't think it would be accepted. So I want to understand what was the culture there that he couldn't be the king.
Yeah, I mean,
because he was blind.
It was a subject of discussion amongst. So what the culture was in those days was that the warrior race, the Kshatriya race, they were governed by the Brahmins. So the Brahmins were the teachers, intellectuals, the priests, and they would advise the royal families. And generally, the warrior families would accept the conclusion of the Brahmin. So, in this case, when they were discussing who was the rightful king, they decided that because Dhritarashtra was blind, that Pandu would be the better king, because Pandu was, also a seasoned warrior and diplomat and all of these things, whereas Dhritarashtra, because of the culture of in those days, then he was, you can say in a sense, he was sidelined from because of his handicap, if you like, his blindness. So another thing we can understand from this, or actually another thing that we maybe can't understand because of our culture compared to then, that when Dhritarashtra was to marry, his wife was betrothed wife. Her name was Gandhari, and when she heard that she was going to marry Dhritarashtra, the blind prince, on that day that she was betrothed to him, she blindfolded herself, and so that her thinking was that she would not be superior to her husband in any way, even by having sight. So if he's blind, I'll also be blind. So by today's thinking, people would say that's crazy, wouldn't they? Like, one person blind and then their wife's going to be blind as well. Like, that's just mad, isn't it? That's what they would think. Everyone today would think that. But what was the effect of that is that because Gandhari took that vow that she would not be able to see if her husband could not see, she developed such great mystical power as a result of that. It's called tapasya, means like taking that austere position. That when her son Duryodhana, when he was young like teenager, she could understand that she had developed such power that if he came to her, she could, just by removing her blindfold temporarily, wherever she cast her glance on him, his body would become like steel, impenetrable by any weapon. There's something like, in Greek mythology, Achilles. You've heard of Achilles. They say that was his Achilles heel, means his weakness. So Achilles' mother, she when he was a child, she dipped him into the water of the river of immortality. His body became like steel, but where she held him around the ankles, that bit was not affected. So that was how they were able to kill Achilles, because that was his weak spot. So similarly, and I suspect that it probably has its origin in that story, that when Gandhari, she wanted to give this kind of boon to her son, Duryodhana, she called him and she told him, "Come to my apartment in the palace tomorrow morning, but you must come naked. And when you come, I will make your body impenetrable, cannot be pierced by any weapon." So it was agreed. Next morning, Duryodhana's going to his mother's apartment, and he's in his birthday suit, as naked as the day he was born. Just by, you can say, chance, the will of providence, on his way there, he bumps into Krishna, who was also at the palace for something. Krishna says, "Duryodhana, where are you going?" He said, "Oh, I'm going to see my mother." She said, going to see your mother naked? He said, yes, yes, she told me to come naked. He said, at least like put something around your waist, like for decency's sake, a towel or something, So he puts a cloth around. Yes, Krishna, you're right. Puts a cloth around his waist. And so then he's covered from his waist to his knees. And when he arrives at his mother's quarters and knocks on the door, she says, yes, come in. Did you come as I asked you? Yes, I'm here, mother. Yes, yes, yes. And she removes her blindfold, and wherever she casts her glance on him, that his body becomes impenetrable. But then she sees he's wearing a towel. Oh, why? I told you come naked. And then he said, yeah, but I bumped into Krishna on the way here, and Krishna, and she just started laughing then. Oh, Krishna's tricks. This is Krishna's tricks. As Krishna knows everything, right? So then that became his vulnerable part, from his waist to his knees. He was vulnerable. So finally, in the final battle of the Kurukshetra war, it comes down to one man versus one man. So there is Duryodhana on the side of the Kauravas and Bhima on the side of the Pandavas. But Bhima's one of the Pandava brothers. They're both expert in fighting with the club. So that and their teacher was Lord Balaram, Krishna's brother. So one of Balaram's names is Duryodhana Guru, because he taught Duryodhana how to fight with the club. But he also taught Bhima how to fight with the club. So in the last battle, they're fighting with each other. But because they're both from the same teacher, had the same teacher, neither one can get the upper hand because they know each other's moves, because they were both taught those moves. It's like when I was some years ago, I was in the Ukraine, and there was a festival there called Veda Life. I was invited to come there and speak, and every day there was some big stage where we would go and speak. So I was asked to speak at this time for 1 hour between this and this, and before me was my godbrother Bhakti Ranjan Madhusudan Maharaj. He has to speak before me. So I came an hour early because I want to also hear his talk. And then as he began talking, I realized that everything that I was going to say, that was what he was saying in his talk. Like almost could have been verbatim what I was planning to say. He was saying that. So at the end of his talk, I didn't have anything to say when it came to my talk. So I had to say to the people there, oh, he already said everything that I was going to say. And that isn't surprising because we were both taught by the same master, the same teacher. So this is how it was with Bhima and Duryodhana. But we were talking about how Draupadi, the wife of the Pandavas, how she was humiliated by Duryodhana when she was brought into the assembly, the warrior assembly of the Kurus. He, to humiliate her and also to humiliate the Pandavas, he pulled up his dhoti and showed his thigh to Draupadi. Said, "Look at that! This is your new master's thigh, isn't it nice?" It's like saying this, and Bhima, who was very hot-headed, he lost his temper then, and he stood up and he said, "I'm going to smash that thigh. I'm going to kill you by smashing that thigh." And the other brothers, they calmed him down. So anyway, they're in the final battle. They're fighting with clubs. Neither one can get the upper hand. Went on for days, and finally, Bhima, he looks at Krishna like, "What am I to do? I don't know what to do." Then Krishna slapped his thigh to give this message, and then Bhima remembered, "Oh yeah, I made that vow to break his thigh." But it's a foul in the the rules of that warfare, fighting with clubs, to hit somebody below the waist is a foul. But Krishna's telling this is the only way you'll be able to kill him. And that's what he did. Smashed his thigh. And Balaram was there watching in the time, and he gets angry, he wants to kill Bhima. But then Krishna talked him down from it. And that was how the war ends. But that was again, all of these things that seem like coincidences, they were all like divine occurrences. So, what was I telling you about now? I can't even remember now what your question was. Trying to understand why, but in that culture at that time, we have to try and remember that the culture in that time was much different to how it is today in so many respects. And, it was something that really happened. So it's not that we can like change that or make some other more palatable version of it, So not everything in history is always happy.
Thank you.
I know we need to wrap up now, but I'm just wondering, there's one more question.
Yeah.
Maybe see short,
Yes.
but otherwise it may need to carry on
Okay.
until next week. The only thing is you'll need to ask if she can say her name, because we can't actually,
Oh yeah.
and if she can unmute.
Your name is written in the Russian text. So if you can tell us your name and your question.
Дандават Шрипад Деваниш Прабhu. Это мне дали слово или кому-то другому? Спасибо большое. Спасибо за возможность задать вопрос. Я хотела бы задать вопрос в плане того, что нужно ли пытаться понять какой-то внутренний смысл шастр. Мне просто кажется, что возьмешь одну шлоку, и там просто приходит очень много смыслов, и все может быть так. То есть даже допустим, взять там Дритараштру, да, что без глаз. Почему? Просто хопа, вот такая мысль, и сразу мне очень много всего приходит, там, а может потому, что он там закрыты глаза, потому что он невежественный, поэтому он не может быть царем, да, не потому что у него там физически что-то с глазами, а потому что он, находится в невежестве, раз у него плоды такие, да, то есть столько детей, демонов родилось, и поэтому жена, идя за таким мужем, да, который идет в невежестве без глаз, да, сама получается становится такой же невеждой, то есть за кем пойдешь, да. И просто очень много мыслей приходит насчет этих шлок, и мне просто кажется, насколько это важно пытаться это все понять, как будто бы Господь настолько многогранен, многолик, что можно запутаться в собственном уме, пытаясь понять внутренний смысл шастр. Хотел такой вопрос задать, насколько это важно хотеть осознать внутренний смысл шастр. Спасибо.
Okay. Who can translate in a brief way?
Dandavat Devashis Prabhu, I will translate. It's a question from Bimala Sundari Didi.
Yes.
And she is asking, if we need to try to understand deep inside meaning of Shastras, because when, for example, she is hearing the information, her mind starts to analyze all of that. And, for example, about Dhritarashtra, that he was blind, that maybe because it was because he was ignorant, and that's why he had this blindness, or his wife was also trying to be blind because she was following him, and so on and so forth. So her mind is starting to analyze that, and she is asking, should we do that or not?
Okay, good question. And of course, it is. We've only got a few minutes, so now, so I'll try and keep the answer brief. Of course, necessarily, we will. When we hear something, that will go through the filter of our own consciousness, our own preconceived ideas, and so on, which is natural. But to get the full benefit from any of the scriptures, we should try to suspend that a little bit and submissively hear the teaching rather than trying to analyze everything. If we can understand the lessons that are being taught, which are above or beyond our preconceived idea about things, which are necessarily a reflection of our own conditioning, then we'll get the greatest benefit from the scripture. So, but naturally there will be some analysis, because this is how we've been. This is also part of our conditioning to be brought up. We're taught, almost all of us, we're taught, question everything, don't accept everything that you hear, and think independently, and that's all very good. That's a good thing. But when we come to spiritual thought, if we can accept it with a submissive mood, to be submissive to the truth, then definitely we'll get a better result from hearing in that way. So I think as far as possible, if of course if there are things that you hear and you can't adjust that properly, then necessary to ask questions. But to ask questions, to have our doubts and removed or resolved, rather than to try to assert our own preconceived notion of things, of what is we think is reality. Because actually we're coming to hear about a different reality, and that reality is the reality of Krishna consciousness, as our Guru Maharaj said, reality the beautiful. So I think that's my answer. Is that okay?
Спасибо большое.
Right. Okay, so draw it to a close this evening. Thank you all so much for being part of this. It's very encouraging to me, and I'm sure you will all become great scholars of Bhagavad Gita. And this is a first step towards that. If you can understand the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, then you'll understand you'll have a solid foundation for your spiritual life. Bhagavad Gita is that solid foundation for Krishna consciousness, for understanding what is reality. And we hope that you'll be excited and wish to continue with us, and hopefully can continue. Try to answer the questions on the summary, on the worksheets, and try to learn the verses. This week it's only one verse, but a very significant verse. And we next week is Gaur Purnima, so we won't be having a class next Wednesday. The following Wednesday we will rejoin again for chapter 2. So thank you all for coming. Jai Vishnupad Srila Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Srila Bhakti Rakak Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Jai Shri Krishna Arjuna Ki Jai. Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. All the assembled devotees Ki Jai. All the world devotees Ki Jai. Sri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Nitai Gaura Premanandi. Hari Hari Bo.
One Devashis Prabhu ki jai. Nitai Gaura Premanandi. Hari Hari. Okay. Oh, no, not ended. It can't end.
It won't end.
Will not end. There we